Second, Mr. Mayor. All right, we're good to go.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Burlingame City Council meeting for December 5th of 2022. We are calling the meeting to order at 7:01. And with that, we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked our city librarian to lead us. Mr. McCauley.
Happy to, Mr. Mayor. If everybody could stand and put your hand over your heart. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry. To share the flag, and for our last meeting, I had to mess up and show you guys my computer screen.
And happy felines for all.
With that, Cat willing, we'll go on to the roll call, please.
Sorry. Councilmember O'Brien. Councilmember Beach.
Here.
Councilmember Coulson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg. Mayor Ortiz.
Here, thank you. With that, we go to report out from closed session, but do we have any report, Mr. City Attorney?
No, we have no report tonight.
I didn't think so. And then with that, we will move on to upcoming events. And what I have from our friends at Parks and Rec is the community garden is renewing plots. If you're interested in a bed, contact Nicola Christie at 650-558-7337 to be put on the wait list. Also, the holiday home decorating contest registration is still in progress. Apply by Monday, December 13th if you want to participate. And then another announcement is the natural grass fields in city parks are closed for maintenance and rejuvenation until February of 2023. So keep off. And I have from our friends at the library, we have a Hanukkah music concert for family at the lawn in front of the Burlingame City Hall in the Burlingame Public Library. Come join PJ, library artist and Diller Award-winning Jewish educator Isaac Zones as he masterfully mixes cultural learning with fun, play, and great music. Learn more about the customs and the story of Hanukkah while you laugh, sing, dance, and bang the drum. That sounds like a fun one. Colleagues, anybody have any additional? Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So on this Sunday, December 11th, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., the Holiday Helping Hand Toy Drive and Gift Wrapping event will occur at the Burlingame, which I think you guys all know, 1864 Rollins Road. The toy drop-off location is, you can drop off at, they are actually, the reason I'm making this announcement is because they are short toys this year. So they've had high demand and fewer toys. So this is Central County Fire in combination with Moms Against Poverty. And it's their 75th anniversary of doing this. And then the Burlingamer has jumped in and is going to provide the wrapping location. And a number of local restaurants are dropping off food for the day for the volunteers. So right now they're looking for any donations for toys for children 0 to 16. You can drop them off at the Burlingamer, the firehouses, or the community center. And I think there's also a couple bins on Broadway. I think Nuts for Candy has one. So anyone help get the word out on your social media and everything. Tell your friends, let everybody know. If we could get some more toys dropped off, that'd be really, really helpful. And anyone who wants to stop by to help wrap, just drop in that day.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. That is a great event, and it is kind of led by our own Central County Fire Department. And so it is a great opportunity for us to get involved. So thank you for that. Anybody else have anything? Okay. Thank you. With that, we will move on to, we don't have any presentations. We will move on to public comment. This is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So with that, council member, we'll give it to Megan, please, if we could to have any members of the public.
I love the promotion, Mr. Mayor.
It's the cat. I'm still catatonic.
I don't have any emails, but I do see some hands up. So we'll start with Sandra Lang. Go ahead.
Good evening, Honorable Council. And first of all, I want to begin by saying that I actually appreciate everything that you do. It's not everybody says thanks, but I think it's pretty challenging. I couldn't help but say what I have to say tonight. And I really am quite distressed about what happened at the Broadway crossing. I think that without getting into all of the different challenges that have come up about improving that, and I can see that I'm sure Emily Beach can agree with me, hopefully. But if this doesn't cry out for much more action, I don't know what we can do, but to get the grade separation in there at some level, I think I hate as soon as we can. It's I find this to be quite concerning. I'm sure you all do too. So it's not a very pleasant thing to bring up at this time of year, but I'm just almost perplexed to some degree about the complexities of, we know why, I guess there's so many funding streams and so much involved, but I really urge all of you with your collective thoughts and the community so that we can get some more action to address that. And of course, it happens at other train crossings throughout the peninsula as well. So I appreciate your time and listening to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Could we, do you have other speakers?
Yes.
City?
Yes, we have a phone number calling in, so I will allow you to talk now.
Hello, good evening, council members. My name is Brian Shields. I'm a field rep for Carpenters Local 217. I believe back in October, my counterpart, Sean Reese, had an opportunity to speak here in the city, and I just wanted to, again, reiterate that. So what I wanted to speak tonight about is the need for labor standards. Labor standards are, it's an escalator for the middle class, and what it would consist of is apprenticeship, healthcare, and a livable wage in this city, right? Attached not only to public works, but also to private works. That threshold could be set anywhere. So I didn't want to take too much time, and I just wanted to have the opportunity to speak on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
All right, we don't have any other public speakers.
Very good. And with that, we will move on to the, and let me just a real quick comment. On Ms. Lang's comment, there's just details that are still coming out that I would hate to make a public comment about it. We're going to let the details of the accident come out and we can understand better what happened before we can comment on it. So it's not that we don't care, but it's important that we get the details before we speak out about it. So with that, we'll move on to the approval of the consent calendar. That is, colleagues, does anybody have any items they'd like to pull? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to discuss briefly items 8F and 8H.
F and H. Very good. Colleagues, anybody else? Having none, then we will go to members of the public. See if there's any members of the public who wish to pull any of the items on the consent calendar.
I don't see any emails and I don't see any hands raised.
Very good. So I will go back to my colleagues for a motion to approve items 8A, B, C, D, E, G, and that's it, G.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve those items.
Thank you.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilmember Beach, a second by Councilmember O'Brien. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes, and with that, we'll move on to item number 8F. Do we want to do a full presentation, Mr. Vice Mayor, or you just want to make a comment?
No need for a presentation. I just had a couple of questions, really, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please go ahead.
So this is the item to approve the EIR study for the new park over on the Bayside. And I want to make a comment and then just a couple of questions. So one, there was an earlier version of this that I thought might be better, but I believe very much in great public open space, and I hope that this project will create great public open space for our city. We are going to become more dense, both in terms of our office space on the Bayside and in some of our residential areas, for example, Wallens Road, which we'll talk about later tonight. And it is important, in fact, incumbent on public officials to create great public open space at the same time that we're creating more dense living environments. So I stand in support of creating a great public park on this parcel. And I wanted to say that at the outset because I have been skeptical about certain elements of this proposal in the past, but it's not because I don't believe in great public open space, and it's not because I don't believe this can become great public open space. I would like the EIR consultant, if possible, to include in the review, and I think it's there implicitly, how the revised seawall, which is now going to not be on the hard border with the rocks, but going to be some kind of more sinuous seawall, ties into the properties next door, both on the east and the west. I think that's an appropriate question because one of the issues that an EIR has to review is the impact on the neighbors. And again, I think this is solvable. I just think if we're paying for this work, I'd like to see consideration done to how the revised seawall defense ties into the neighbors, especially in light of what we all see happening on the Bayside, which is a growing seawall to defend our land against sea level rise. Second, I'd like at least thought given to whether the mud flats that are getting created with this park, whether if we used Anza Lagoon to demonstrate the same mud flat changes would allow us to perhaps not give as much land away to the mud flats. I spend a lot of time walking on the Bayside. I go there probably twice or three times a week, and there are a lot of mud flats that you can enjoy already. So to the extent that we can safeguard some of this additional land for dry land, I think it's a plus. So I'd love the EIR group to at least consider the question of whether the mud flat area could be reduced if Anza Lagoon was used instead. I am not trying to throw sand in the gears. I want this project to move forward. I just would like to see it be as beneficial for Burlingame as possible. And that's it, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to make those comments on this important stage in this important project. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to comment on this from the standpoint of, tying back into one shoreline and kind of the whole vision that we've scoped out along the whole shoreline. And to make sure in the EIR work that we are I mean, we would hate to analyze the EIR on a certain scope. And then as the vice mayor points out, you know, there's a sort of a different design build that maybe would have occurred getting everybody involved in Peninsula Clean Energy. I mean, I'm sorry, I have too many places I'm working on, one shoreline, just to make sure that I think the work that some of the other builders are doing on the front bay shore, the creek restoration work, the work with BCDC, the natural habitat work, amphitheaters and things they're doing are really beautiful, and trying to sort of keep some sort of a thematic presentation going along the whole bayfront would be, I think, valuable to Burlingame. So thanks, Kevin, for working on this, and I'll look forward to reading it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excited to see this EIR approval come through. And, you know, I concur with Councilmember Coulson's comment about just making sure we're coordinated and there's consideration for the good work that One Shoreline is doing regionally. It makes a lot of good sense. To Councilmember Brownrigg's comments, I've heard a lot of description of this project. I haven't heard mud flats used to describe a lot of the biodiversity and the green infrastructure, but I don't know if the project sponsors are going to comment or if that's going to be followed up with offline, but that's interesting to me. I haven't heard that term. I would, at some point while we're talking about this project, I'd love to hear an update about the grant progress. I know they were making some really significant progress. So, you know, one question was viability of how that's going. It's not really related to the EIR, but at some point in the future, if we have a presentation, that would be of interest to me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, let's open it to members of the public to see if there's anyone who wants to comment on this item.
Don't have any hands up, and I don't. Ooh, we do have one. Greg, go ahead.
Hi, council members. Greg Borrow calling or speaking from the Sphere Institute, the primary sponsor for the park project that's in discussion. Thanks, Council Member Beach, for pointing out the difference between the mudflat and what we have proposed, which is a wetland, and there's a tremendous environmental difference between the two. I understand what Council Member Brownrigg is saying about maximizing the available space and use for the public. And that is certainly a major goal of ours as well. If we build it, we want them to come. So I thank you for those comments. And this is my first time going through the EIR process, so I'm sure there will be questions and issues that arise through the process, but we're looking forward to tackling them as they come.
Mr. Burrow, would you care to comment on the seawall and how it relates to the properties on either side?
Thank you, Mayor Ortiz. I did forget about that. Yeah, we are in close discussion with One Shoreline. We've had, I think, 4 meetings with them to date, almost monthly meetings scheduled going forward. We have maintained from the beginning that whatever the project needs to do to tie into the regional solution will be done. Right now, there is a question of our 18-foot levee and whether it needs to be a engineered certified levee or if the dense pack is enough. But we will resolve those questions and implement the correct strategy to make sure it ties into both the east and west sides of the parcel.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your comments.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Back to our city clerk. Do we have any other public comment?
Through the mayor, could you just ask the project sponsor about, while he's on, about grant progress? I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Is that appropriate?
I don't know, Mr. Bohr, if you're still on, if you could come back on and maybe give us an update on the grant progress.
I am still here. Thank you, Councilmember Beach. I'm thrilled to report that we've received grant awards in excess of $2.5 million so far. These are funds to help offset the planning expenses that we've incurred. Sphere Institute has bared a a high percentage of the cost to date. And we considered this a public-private partnership from the beginning, and it certainly is going in that direction. We have a grant application outstanding with the EPA, and hope that we get at least some partial award. This was the first grant that we received for $500,000, and this is the same grant we released a new round of funds. So we're optimistic and nervous at the same time.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm sorry, Councilmember Colson, and you guys, the issue on the agenda is the EIR. We've kind of gone a long way away from that, and I see Mr. Guina starting to get steam out of his ears.
So thank you. Just tying back into when we get an update on the project, and I'm sure when Vice Mayor is mayor next year, he'll be interested in having that at one of our council meetings. I would also like to include in that under grant progress, sort of the total funding scope of the project. So, and then
So can we leave that for future agenda items?
That's what I'm asking for, is I'm just saying when they do this in the future, if they could add on the grant progress and also like the estimated cost and how the payments are going to happen and all that. That's just for future.
Okay, with that, we have no more further public comment. So with that, I entertain a motion from one of my colleagues.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the EIR. I do hope that the EIR consultants and that Mr. Gardner can ensure this happens, listen to this conversation. And if they, can take aboard the comments that have been made with respect to the study that were, the Sphere Institute very graciously going to pay for, but that we are approving tonight, I would appreciate it. So anyway, I make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Motion second is fine.
I have a motion by Vice Mayor Brownrigg and a second by Councilmember Colson. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Colson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes. And with that, we'll move on to item number 8H, consideration of sending a letter to the governor regarding the net energy metering. And I believe that was you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
I did. I am very conscious of Councilwoman Colson's expertise in this matter, but I did want to discuss it. In part, I thought we almost had to, because I thought staff was asking us a question about whether we should send a letter or not. And so I didn't really think it could be on consent. I will, just since I have the mic, I do think sending, let me just say this. As a general matter, I don't like waving my arms around if I can't do something about it, that sort of, and I don't think realistically we're too small and too late to make a difference with our opinion. That said, I think there are reasons to be on record as being concerned about this policy movement by the CPUC. So personally, I look forward to the conversation, but preliminarily, I lean into doing a letter. So, but I would rather, I'm sorry, I've already spoken too much. I'd rather hand off to Councilwoman Colson, given her expertise.
Thank you. Councilmember Colson.
Thank you very much. So we had a pretty extensive discussion today with the executive committee from Peninsula Clean Energy. And just to give colleagues an update, Peninsula Clean Energy will be providing formal comments as they are an interested party in this ruling, but in a very, very narrow scope. And the scope has to do with the right now 180 days sort of glide path to get this occupied. I'm sorry, it's actually 120 days, and they've asked for 180 days. And that has to do with allowing some of the new projects that we might be doing. So for example, I know we're talking to Burlingame School District about net energy metering and solar up on their additional panels on their properties, for example, and we would need 180 days to get those in under NEM 2.0. You guys all read what the differences are between 2.0 and 3.0. And the real reason that PCE and a lot of organizations are not stepping in in a very profound way on this is because a lot of this has to do with equity, social justice and equity. And the rationale is that for the most part, high income residents in San Mateo County are able to install solar, and the lower income residents then subsidize that solar energy and that solar installation. So when the CPUC was originally ruling on this, the person who was in charge is no longer there, set it up within an equity framework, and the governor's been looking at it from an equity framework. So, even though I received calls from constituents, and former Mayor Nagel weighed in through one of our constituents and a few other people to really push for this, I feel like we can write a letter, but it needs to be a gentle letter, because there is a flip side to it, which is the social equity and justice piece. And I know we're all very conscientious about that. I will also support writing a letter because it's very narrowly focused. But I do want all of us to have the full understanding and understand why most cities are not writing a letter. We will probably be the only city in San Mateo County sending in a letter to the governor.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember O'Brien.
Yeah, so I just had one question in reading this. Do we want the last sentence where it says proposals adverse effects are not in line with our climate objectives? Do we want to mention those climate objectives that they're not in line with?
And just enumerate them right there.
If you had a couple bullet points on.
Any thoughts, colleagues?
It's just such a generalized statement. I don't know if you want to be a little more specific on how it doesn't line up with Burlingame's climate objectives.
For what it's worth, I think Councilwoman O'Brien is exactly right. If we can add even a 1 or 2 example, maybe Segal can, it would make it a stronger letter.
Yeah.
I think the main objective is so essentially the very negative thing that will happen is it will essentially solar will go from being able to pay for itself in say 10 to 15 years. They're going to cut that credit that you're getting, or the rebate you're getting when you sell back to the grid, because we have so much solar coming on that the value of selling back solar in the middle of the day in the grid is going down. It actually is causing the grid to get congested and create problems for the grid. So that value is going down. So what that means is when you offload to the grid, you're going to get paid less. It means your repayment on your overall installation is going to go to be like 20 or 30 years. And so essentially it will, the concern is that it would decrease existing homeowners because new homes have to put it on no matter what. Existing homeowners would be how would I say this? The financial incentives would no longer be there to really install solar on future existing homes. And that is how it wouldn't align possibly with our goals.
Okay, I'm sorry. So
it costs. It's not going to pay to put it on your rooftop anymore. It's just going to be more the payback.
Right. It's going to be a less valuable investment to put them on than it is. You're still going to get it paid back after a few more years, but
right. But I still think it might be better to specify in a bullet point.
Solar. You could just say discourage the use of, it will discourage the installation of solar on existing homes in Burlingame.
Very good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good. That's what you had in mind, Ann? Councilmember O'Brien?
That works for me. It was just too generalized of a statement. And so I just wanted a little more specific verbiage.
Perfect. Okay. I think I can support that. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Brownrigg, you still have your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I thought a lot about this too, and I do understand the equity argument that says for folks who were able, who had enough extra capital that they could put solar on their roof. In essence, all of us, I mean, poor people, middle class, whoever, are subsidizing those people by higher electricity rates because we're overpaying for the electricity they're generating. That's basically the argument. And therefore, that's why it's an equity argument, because if you are less advantaged, you don't have the opportunity to put solar on your roof. I get that argument, and I agree with it. The thing that feels different to me is the California solar mandate, where every new house now has to have solar panels on it. Whether you wanted them or not, you are forced to have them. And in essence, what I worry about the CPUC's approach is not just the people who had the wherewithal to put panels on up until today, but the people who are required to put them on. And whether it's for their own home or they're going to rent it out to somebody else, that home is becoming more expensive to build. And the CPUC policy, by allowing somebody to recoup that investment sooner, effectively, I think, keeps the price of housing down. And conversely, if you don't allow if you don't permit residents to make a return, then the price of housing is going to go up, whether you're a renter or you're an owner. And so for me, this is an equity argument, but it's actually an equity argument now that we have the California solar mandate to keep it the way it is. And that's why I both in favor of sending the letter, and I would even be in favor of adding a line or two that explains that by asking every new house, and by the way, Governor Newsom, you want 3 million new homes to have solar panels, but not allow those builders or landowners or homeowners to recoup, you're basically making housing more expensive. And that's not the policy direction that we want to be going in the state of California. So to me, I'm in favor of the letter, and I'm in favor of elaborating with a line or two that says, this is actually going to work in favor of keeping housing costs slightly lower.
Okay, Councilmember Beach.
I really appreciate Councilmember Coulson providing us that additional context. We all are deep diving in different lanes, and that one I hadn't fully understood the equity issue, and that this new CPUC sort of proposal backs down on some of the more egregious things, but is trying to be reasonable. So after your comments, I started to think, geez, if the deadline's on the 5th anyway, and PCs, all these other jurisdictions aren't jumping on this because this is a reasonable compromise, it did give me pause. If we do send it, I do agree with Council Members Brownrigg's comment to add that line, because I think that's a reasonable angle for how to keep housing prices down. And I just really appreciate the dialogue. I could go either way on this at this point. And then I came in thinking, originally starting this meeting, like, of course we have to approve this. This is a no-brainer, but I really appreciate the thoughtful dialogue that colleagues are bringing to it. So I'm sort of on the fence with this, and we're happy to go along with the majority, whatever we decide to do. But if we do, let's add that line in the letter. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so let's open it up to members of the public to see if we have any public comment on this item.
We have one hand up from Mr. Manning. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi there, my name is Jared Manning, and I do want to urge you all to support rooftop solar with this letter. I've already emailed you individually, but I wanted to summarize my points here, particularly about the staff report. So your staff report points out that the CPU proposal is not as bad as the last one, because there's no monthly fee just to have solar on your roof. But the CPUC has already stated that they're going to debate this next year and likely bring in such a fee. So they've basically just split the bad news, and they're feeding it to us bit by bit. They also removed a clause that would break the 20-year contracts with current solar homeowners and replace them with a 15-year contract. So that's gone now. But if you now add even 1 or 2 solar panels to your roof to help with electrification, you're straight onto NEM 3.0, no grandfathering whatsoever. So in some ways it's worse. I want to go electric, and I want to add some more solar panels, and that's the beauty of doing both together. But I can't now. I'll never be able to afford to do that, because I would lose all of my NEM 2 privileges. So those 2 major points, it looks better as a new proposal. It really isn't. And I also want to take issue with the odd claim that solar power puts extra strain on the grid. So this really is just not true. It's the opposite. So any excess power generated from your solar roof will at most go out to your block, to your neighborhood. So there's a tiny bit of electricity going within your neighborhood. There is far less on the grid. Those huge spikes in the middle of the day when you're running air conditioning, it's rooftop solar that's taking the edge off that and pushing it later. So I think that's just a red herring. I'm not sure how it got into your report. And I want to just make one point. I looked up in the past hour, electricity generation in California generated 8,000 tons of CO2. We're still generating 40% of our electricity by burning fossil fuel. We need to move faster and faster to get off that. And NEM 3.0 will probably at least halve the rate of solar adoption. It would be lovely to have big solar farms in the desert, but we can't take anything off the table right now. So I really urge you, whatever the impact, to write this letter to the governor and let him know that this really matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other members of the public before I go back to colleagues?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you. So Councilmember Colson.
I was just saying, I was looking at my notes from today, that, I mean, I think we've written a pretty balanced letter, and, you know, the real key to this whole thing and to solving it, and we talked a long time about this today, is battery storage. And the problem is right now, like I've spent the last year looking to add battery backup to my house so I could store my energy during the day and instead of have to put it onto the grid. And you just can't get it. So you can't buy them. I literally can't find them. And even if I can, people are telling me $40,000 to install what I need for battery backup. So the good news is, and I think you can all be comfortable, that Peninsula Clean Energy's leadership is really focused on this. We know this is a problem, and we're going to try to work on, work well with the PCE on this, creating a better equity situation, as well as to figure out the big problem, which is how to get battery storage so that, you know, it really makes sense for people to put solar panels on their house, kind of regardless of what NEM 3.0, you know, does to you, because you don't have to sell it back. You can just keep it and use it later that day for yourself.
Right, thanks. We installed our solar about almost exactly a year ago. And I think under the new proposal, it would have been a little less affordable. So I'm glad we did it when we did, and I hopefully. But I do think that we need to continue to encourage this. So I'm in favor of the letter with the corrections stated. Ms. Goldman, you're fine with that? So if somebody would like to make a motion to send a letter as amended.
I'd like to make that motion, Mr. Mayor, but I wonder if we could just spend 1 minute talking about whether it would be okay to add a line about the fact that the solar mandate requires solar panels on all new housing, and that this effectively, indirectly, will drive up the price of housing if we don't allow those homes to recoup those investments. I'm sure we could come up with a simple line or two, but and if there's not support for that, I'm in support of the simpler letter as well. I just think it's an additional talking point.
Okay, colleagues, what's your thoughts on adding the affordability issue? Councilmember O'Brien.
I would actually like to see that added. I think actually that was an angle I actually didn't consider.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Any other comments? I see a lot of people nodding. Councilmember Colson, you're good with that amendment?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I think the bigger issue on that is the mandate to require all new homes to have solar. I mean, it's a ridiculous mandate in a lot of ways, because if you're building a brand new house in a shaded lot down in a hill, it makes no sense to put on solar. You should spend your money on electrification of your home and upgrading to Eco 100 as opposed to putting on solar panels. So again, this to me is just an issue of the state setting broad mandates that don't allow for local control and thoughtful local control, and working with agencies that understand their constituency and their built environment in a way that, you know, the efficacy of the work we do can be more aligned with the interests of our community. So I think that points kind of that broader comment out, Michael.
Okay, so we can add the section, like another sentence about the affordability now that it is a requirement. And Councilmember O'Brien, do you wish to, how would you like to word that sentence that you were proposing?
I would actually leave that up to the attorney and just getting the general essence on how it kind of goes against our climate action objectives and really trying to encourage people to have solar panels. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, just new houses. We also want to promote it for existing houses, but if it's going to be out of reach financially, you know, with this new NEMS 3, then it kind of defeats the purpose of the encouragement that we're trying to do in our community.
Very good. Okay, so
I think I've got it. It would be me, not the attorney. Perhaps what I can do is add this language and then just run it by Councilmember Colson, who has the most on these issues, and then we'll get it sent off in the next day or two, if that's okay with everyone.
very good. So what we need is a motion to.
With all of that as prologue, Mr. Mayor, I incorporate all of that in a motion to approve sending a letter and allowing our very, very highly capable city manager to figure it out with your signature. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Mayor Brownrigg, a second by Councilmember O'Brien. Please, can we have a roll call?
Councilmember O'Brien?
Yeah.
Councilmember Colson? Or Councilmember Beach? I'm sorry, I'm going out of order tonight too.
Yes.
Councilmember Colson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg?
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that nice, thoughtful conversation. And now we're moving on to item number 9A, public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving and levying the 2023 San Mateo County Tourism Business Improvement District assessment on hotel businesses within the district. Madam Finance Director, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council member. At the November 7th meeting, the City Council approved the San Mateo County Tourism Business Improvement District, their 2022 annual report, along with the resolution intend to hold tonight public hearing to levy annual assessment for 2023. After last meeting, the staff update a recent change. The American Best Value Inn in City San Mateo had changed its name to Inn Bay Shore. So the resolution in tonight package, as well as the notice staff sent out, have included those updates. Tonight, the council is asked to conduct public hearing and determine whether a majority protest have been made. The city clerk can report on any protest received. Megan, did you receive any protest?
No, I did not.
Since we don't have any protest, staff recommend adopt the resolution and approve the assessment. That will conclude my staff report. I noticed that the Bureau President John Hattar in the audience tonight. Both John and I are available to answer any question that you may have. Thank you. Back to you, Mayor.
Mr. Hattar, did you have a comment for us tonight? Is he available? And with that, maybe we can bring him on with public comment. Oh, there he is. Good evening, Mr. Hattar. Oh.
Good evening, Mayor Ortiz, Vice Mayor Brownrigg, and council members. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight. And we, as you saw in our staff report, it was a busy year to try to bring tourism back. We are not yet back to 2019 levels, but in a much better place than we were in 2020, 2021, respectively. Our rebranding of the marketing approach to our area has been very, very well received. People get it, those who know the region. we often hear the comment, why didn't you do this years ago? Those who aren't familiar with it gives them a better sense of place. The airline enplanements and deplanements at San Francisco Airport through August are at 69% of 2019 levels. So as folks are coming into the area, we feel we're being effective in keeping them in our region here, which has generated, for the first time since the pandemic started, thus far this year, we have had monthly occupancies in excess of 70% for 5 months this year. So the work is not yet complete, but we are in a much better space, and look forward to, fingers crossed, that this corporate layoff issue that is starting to become a big pervasive doesn't negatively impact us, but we're doing everything we can to mitigate these circumstances. And with that, if you have any specific questions, I'll gladly answer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hutar. Thank you for the update. Colleagues, does anybody have questions of the Finance Director or Mr. Hutar? Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. This is for Mr. Hutar. When we were at the Burlingame City, at the Burlingame Community Center with the Joint Chamber and Silicon Valley Tourists Year Group meeting, in talking to a couple of our local hotel operators, they were telling me that one of the reasons they can't get back into full capacity is because they're having trouble hiring staff. Are you seeing that as a problem throughout the hotel industry? And is that inhibiting their ability to get up? Or is it more, we need to do a better job marketing, we just need to get more people in and they have capacity?
That is a very complicated issue that is very real, unfortunately. It is difficult. Many staff took the COVID time to find other work that was better on their schedules, better compensation, et cetera. And it continues to be a challenge to find staff, particularly in the food and beverage, food prep areas. You may hear some similar comments from restaurateurs and restaurant owners. It has gotten a bit better the last few months. We have some optimism that perhaps as the tech sector pulls back their workforce, they may find work in the hotel industry attractive. That could be a difficult transition, to be honest, because in the hotel industry, there are some positions that are suited for remote work or hybrid work, but by and large, you have to be at the property to provide the service. In the earliest days of recovery, there were hotels, some in our city, that were forced to hold back occupancy because they simply didn't have staff to clean rooms. I think by and large that time has passed, and we've moved on beyond that. But overall in the industry, it is quite a challenge. There has been a lot of discussion on workforce retention through CalTravel, through Visit California, and what initiatives the industry could take to improve that.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for that. And colleagues, any other questions? And with that, then we will open it to members of the public to see if we have any comments from members of the public. Madam City Clerk.
Mayor Ortiz, I don't have any emails and I don't see any hands up.
Okay, so I bring it back to my colleagues. Any final comments, or does anybody wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve let me make sure I get this completely right.
The motion is to adopt a resolution approving the levying of assessment for the San Mateo County Tourist and Business Improvement District.
And I also want to apologize to John because I saw I forgot, we rebranded last year, the Peninsula, San Francisco Peninsula, not Silicon Valley. So my apologies for that. because I love the new branding. But I'll make a motion to go ahead and approve that.
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion by Councilmember Coulson, a second by Councilmember Beach. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes, yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes. Thank you. With that, we will move on to item number 9B, which is a consideration of a resolution determining that the public convenience and necessity would be served by the California Alcoholic Beverage Control Bureau's issuance of a type 41 alcoholic beverage sales license for Tottenham Wines and Spirits International LLC located at 339 Primrose Road. And I see Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor Ortiz and members of the council. A request has been submitted to the city for a finding of public convenience and necessity related to Tottenham Wine and Spirits International LLC's request for a type 41 alcoholic beverage license for the sale of alcoholic beverages in conjunction with a new restaurant use. A type 41 license is for what is called a on-sale beer and wine eating place license, and that allows beer and wine, but not distilled spirits. The applicant has provided a description of the restaurant as specializing in Italian tapas-style plates and quality seasonal charcuteries with a wide selection of complimentary wine pairing. Pursuant to the California Business and Professions Code, in instances where the number of licenses for alcohol sales within a census tract exceeds the maximum number within that tract set by the ABC, which would constitute an over-concentration, a finding of public convenience and necessity is required of the local jurisdiction before the ABC will consider the license request. 339 Primrose Road is currently located in Census Tract 6055, which roughly consists of downtown Burlingame and its surrounding area. There are currently 48 on-sale licenses in this census tract, and the ABC limits this amount of licenses in this tract to 8. Because the number of licenses within the census tract exceeds the maximum permitted by ABC, the agency's rules require that the applicant seek a finding of public convenience and necessity from the city before they will process the request. The Burlingame Police Department has reviewed the request for approval of the ABC license. The findings of this review are provided with the staff report. To summarize, the department supports a finding of public convenience and necessity based in part upon findings that, first of all, the 339 Primrose location is located in a commercial business district with no parks, schools, or residential housing in the immediate area. Restaurants such as the type described in the application are characteristically low crime establishments and require minimum police service and police service statistics at comparison establishments currently operating in Burlingame support this assertion. And finally, that although the establishment is not yet open for business, a visit to the location did not reveal any concerns regarding the general area or the building itself. The staff report and proposed resolution provides a series of recommended conditions that would be forwarded to the ABC for its consideration prior to the issuance of the license. Chief Matucci is in attendance if there are questions for the Chief of Police. And I did see the applicant was here earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here. But in any case, certainly myself and the chief are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Community Development Director. With that, I'll open it to my colleagues for any questions. And I don't see any. I just have to say that as an Arsenal fan, I'm having a little trouble with this one. But with that, let's open it to members of the public to see if we have any comments.
Mayor Ortiz, I don't see any hands raised and I don't have any emails.
Very good. And so with that, I'll bring it back to my colleagues for a final comments or a motion to approve. Not all at once.
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Councilmember Beach. Do we have a second?
Well, second.
Have a second by Councilmember O'Brien. So with that, let's have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien?
Yes.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg?
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. And with that, we'll move on to item number 10A, which is a consideration of a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a loan agreement with Allied Housing, Inc. to provide fund assistance to a proposed affordable housing development at 1875 California Drive in the amount of $1,432,138. And with that, I'm not sure who's doing the presentation. Mr. Gardner, please, Mr. Community Development Director Gardner.
Me again. So thank you, Mayor Ortiz, members of the council. Affordable housing impact fees are used to support and build new homes for lower income residents. The fees can be charged to developers of new residential projects and used for land purchase, construction costs, or site rehabilitation related to providing workforce housing. They're also charged to commercial projects. Apologize. On October 17th of this year, the City Council reviewed a funding request from CRP Affordable Housing and Community Development, working with Allied Development to provide funding assistance for a proposed 100% affordable housing development at 1875 California Drive. The development, known as Eucalyptus Grove Apartments, would consist of 69 units affordable to households making between 20 and 50% of area median income. At that meeting, the project proposed either a loan scenario or a fee waiver grant. The loan scenario would provide greater benefit by the way the tax credit rules work, and the consensus from the council was to pursue that route. The terms would be the same as those from the funding coming from San Mateo County for this project. Subsequent to the October 17th meeting, staff met with representatives from the developer to confirm the terms of the loan. CRP representatives confirmed that they would propose the same terms, loan terms that were presented to the City Council. We then checked in with the City Council Housing Fund Subcommittee consisting of Vice Mayor Brownrigg and Councilmember Colson to review and confirm the loan terms. Subcommittee members expressed interest in understanding what would happen to the loan and the project at the conclusion of the 55-year term. Staff followed up with CRP, which indicated that the loan is due when it matures at the end of 55 years. However, at that time, there could be negotiation to extend the loan term and extend the project's affordability. So based on this direction, the council is being provided a resolution for consideration that would authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a loan agreement with Allied Housing Incorporated to provide funding assistance towards the proposed project with terms substantially consistent with the terms presented to the City Council. The resolution is not the agreement itself, but it does provide the mechanism for preparing the agreement. So with that, I am available for questions, and representatives from the development team are also in attendance if there are questions.
Great, thank you, Director Gardner. And just for the benefit of the public, we did discuss this quite a bit when it came up before us before. So we will once again touch on some of the items. So Councilmember Colson.
Okay, great. This is a wonderful example of us using our commercial linkage fees to leverage into the NOFA funding. I think we're on NOFA 11 or 12 that the San Mateo County is doing, which is the federal, state, and county Measure K funds. So putting our money in will leverage that to like $5 or $6 additional million plus the other capital stack that this developer is working on. And I really support this. I'm on the HCDC committee that reviewed this. I was so excited to see it. I think it's a model, and I hope we can share it with other people who own property in this area to get them to encourage them to put together projects like this. And then I also just have a quick question for the developer, and it's so the loan will be repaid with the residual proceeds from the cash flow. I'm sure after a hurdle rate of return and everything else. But how long do they estimate in the pro forma that it will take to pay all of this back? And if they can't get it paid by the 55 years and there's a residual balance on it, what happens then?
I'm sorry, who's responding to that? Are we bringing
That's,
somebody?
that's to the developer who just presented. Or Kevin can
actually,
answer it.
Well, I think the developer can answer that. Perhaps when the public hearing, I would imagine, I see Vice Mayor Brownrigg's hand is also up. So maybe we collect a few questions and then hear from the developer team.
Okay, so is the developer in the waiting room that we can bring them on?
They are, yes. There's, if the developer, I see a number of them, if those who would like to speak to represent the project could raise their hands, the city clerk can admit you as a panelist.
And Mr. Vice Mayor, do you have questions for the developer so we can listen, get them all answered?
Right. In truth, Mr. Mayor, my raised hand is more by way of a comment. So no, I don't have any additional questions.
Okay, let's try to get the question answered, and then we will open it to members of the public, and then we can go to comments.
Kevin, I don't see hands up.
I'll see hands up.
Is it Sam or Sam? Can you raise your hand if you're prepared to talk tonight?
Or Elias.
Or Elias?
Ellie.
Elias is ready. All right, let me promote him.
I just did.
Okay. There we go. If you can just unmute yourself, Elias.
Got it. Thanks. Can you guys hear
You're
me?
on. Yep.
Yep.
Great. Councilmember Colson, would you mind just repeating the questions one more
Yeah.
time?
So
Thanks.
the question is, what do you think the payback period will be? I understand it's a residual payment. So is it, just interest? Do you think you'll just pay the interest every year? What do you think you will for the payment? I know it's 55-year term. And the second question is, if at the end of 55, there is some residual dollar amount still left on the loan, what would happen with that?
Got it. Yes. So in our financial pro forma right now, we're showing payments both to the county and to the city loans at the end of every year, at the end of every month. So I'm actually looking at the model right now. It looks like we would pay off the I don't want to, could I give you a more informed
Yeah, you
answer?
can just get back to Kevin, and maybe Kevin can just, send that out to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to misrepresent something on this call and then have it be, written in.
No, absolutely.
But
completely appreciate that.
yeah, but I mean, we are making equal payment because the loan terms for the county loan and for the city loan are in theory the same. We're hoping and planning to make payments on both of those every year, every month.
Okay, so it's like probably a pro rata type thing, whatever.
Yeah, as a percentage of the capital structure and when the deal, when it closes.
So if you could
exactly
look at the pro forma and figure out like the payback is 17 years, 25 years, 45 years, whatever that might be. And then if there is a residual at the end of 55 years, or would you probably refinance the capital structure along the way? I just want to understand that a little more.
Yeah, so if there's a balance on the loan and the loan is due, then it would certainly trigger some sort of refinancing event.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have
potentially
no intent
control over. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. That's it. That's all. It's really for curiosity of how it's structured and understanding how these are, because we're going to have people that, Michael, we're going to have to, Vice Mayor Brownrigg, you and I are going to have to explain to people how these work, and I need to understand how they work. So when we have our committee together of lay people, and they're saying, well, are we giving a loan? They're not going to understand exactly what a traditional loan is and traditional financing versus this kind of financing. So I think we just need to have those details in preparation, Kevin, for that meeting. So when we're explaining how these work to people, we're aptly conversant.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, Mr. Weiss, thank you very much. And so, Mr. Vice Mayor, you're good then if I wait till after public comment for your comments?
100%. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so with that, Madam City Clerk, if we could open it up for public comment.
I don't see anyone with their hand raised, and I don't have any emails.
Thank you. With that, I'll bring it back to the Vice Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we have other things to consider tonight, but I just want to pause for a second and thank the developers here. Thank Councilwoman Colson and Councilwoman O'Brien for their work on HCD and housing. There is a narrative that we're all very aware of that peninsula suburban cities are not interested in housing, and we're doing everything we can to declare ourselves mountain lion zones and whatnot. And I just think our city stands in a really stark contrast to that. And this kind of project, I'm just so proud of. And so I just want to put it into numbers for a second. I mean, you know, we rattle through these things, but we're going to create 69 units here. You know, 7 studios, 21 1-bedroom, 21 2-bedroom, 23 bedroom for people making between 20% and 50% of AMI. So that for a single family is sort of 30,000 to, you know, 70,000 for one person. So that's our minimum wage. If you make the minimum wage in Burlingame next year, you can now afford one of these units. If you are a school teacher in Burlingame, which according to salary.com, the range is $58,000 to $85,000, and you have a family of 2 or 3, you can afford one of these units. And I am just, and I know there's going to be people who complain. They'll complain that it's tall or that it doesn't have enough parking. But this is what we do to make our community open to everybody who works here and to make sure that our communities are diverse economically and in other ways too. And I just wanted to say that, Mr. Mayor, because sometimes we go through this so fast and all of us know these numbers, but I don't think the public always appreciates this. We are creating housing for regular working people. When I first moved to Burlingame 25 years ago, you know, our average house in Burlingame, I'm not talking about my house, but the average house in Burlingame was 3 times the price of an average house in the United States. Today, the average house price in Burlingame is 6 to 7 times the price of an average house in the United States. And what we're doing here and what we're doing with the Rollins Road work that again, Councilwoman Colson and Keegan have done so much work on is creating an ability for people to have starter homes in Burlingame, to get a leg into Burlingame the way we did and the way our parents did. And I'm just proud of it. I'm sorry. I just wanted to spend a minute talking about that. I'm fully in support of the loan, as you can probably tell. Thank you.
Okay, that almost sounded like a motion, but colleagues, anybody else has any comments? Any final comments? Otherwise, we'll take his motion and run with it.
No.
Councilmember Beach, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't even hear that it was a motion. Fully support it. Think we should go for the loan. Makes better use for the project. So if Vice Mayor made the motion, I defer to Councilmember Colson if you'd like to make the second. I just wanted to get it going because it's such a great project.
I'm going to make the motion in the second at the HCDC meeting to land the other 20 million. So you go ahead right here.
All right, I'll second the Vice Mayor so we can vote.
Good. So anybody have any final comments before we go to vote? And with that, then I'll hand it over to our city clerk to do the roll call.
Councilmember O'Brien?
Yes.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Councilmember Colson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg?
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz?
Yes, and I thank you, Vice Mayor, for bringing that up. I think that is important stuff, and I'm glad you brought it up because you're right. We just kind of fly through some of these things because we all know what it's all about, but it's good to remind the members of the public why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you for that. And with that, we will move on to item number 9B. I'm sorry, no, number 10B, which is an overview of the North Rollins specific plan. Let me guess, Community Director Gardner again?
How did you guess? Good news, I have others making presentations as well. So if you're tired of me, that won't last long. In January 2019, the City Council adopted a comprehensive update of the Burlingame General Plan. The General Plan includes the following goal. Goal CC12, recreate Rollins Road as two distinct but complementary districts, with the southern 2/3 of the corridor supporting industrial and creative business enterprises, and the northern 1/3 of the corridor reimagined as a live-work complete residential neighborhood with parks, tree-lined streets, and a pedestrian orientation that connects to the Millbrae multimodal transit station. The city has been working on a new specific plan that will implement this general plan policy for the northern portion of the Rollins Road corridor. And tonight we're pleased to provide the City Council with an overview of the draft plan. I'd like to acknowledge the participation and guidance from the City Council Subcommittee for this project, Council Members O'Brien and Colson. We're very grateful for your interest, support, and guidance. And also, as mentioned in the staff report, the Planning Commission reviewed the same draft last month. I do see one of the Planning Commissioners here as well, so thank you for that. A summary is provided in the staff report, and there will also be a summary in the consultant presentation. With us tonight, and as I read your names, if you can raise your hand so we can bring you in as a speaker. From our consultant team is Cindy Ma from KTGY, Casey Case and Dana Falk from Gates and Associates, John Moreland and Jasmine Torres from Rincon Consultants, and Mike Mowry from Kimley Horn. The consultant team has prepared a presentation.
Hi there, you guys waiting on me? Sorry, it was upgrading me to a panelist. Okay, share my screen. All right, are you guys able to see our presentation now? Awesome. Okay, so thank you. It's a pleasure to see some of you again. Nice to see others of you for the first time. So we're just going to do a hopefully quick and simple overview of our North Rollins specific plan. And this is going to have a little bit of a recap of some of the efforts to date, as well as some new and exciting discussions of the draft plan you guys have had available to review. So we want to go through some of the organization of that and talk through some of the thoughts that went into the initial outreach that led us to the draft plan that we have today. Okay, so our summary of the outreach to date will be reviewing, which you guys have seen before, but we did have a little bit of time in between the last time we've had a conversation and today, as well as how we developed some of our objectives, which led the process we're presenting, and then an overview of the organization of the specific plan, and then into our next step. So where we started, June of 2020, we had initiated some community engagement. We spoke to a lot of different stakeholders and several different committees about what we would like to see in the North Rollins district, as well as how we would like to implement that through our specific plan. We put together some concept plans, received feedback on some of the preferences of how this area was addressed in the specific plan and what we ultimately would like to see in this district. Then we put together our draft specific plan, had that reviewed by our committees, and then we are here after meeting with the Planning Commission last month to chat with you guys about it this evening. We've done a lot of outreach because we wanted to hear as many thoughts and opinions as possible to make sure we were really considering all the angles, aspects, and opportunities with the specific plan. So this is just a summary of some of those groups, committees, and different opinions we got throughout this process. We met with each group multiple times and had different findings from each group, and we really made an effort to try to coalesce all that information into the specific plan to make sure that we're implementing the ideal community feel, emphasis, and policies within the specific plan. So one of the main principles that we discuss a lot throughout the specific plan is that we designated the area into sub areas. And the intention behind this was not to control the use within those areas, but instead to talk about the unique elements that may occur within them. So for example, Area 5 has overhead utilities as well as a lot of complicated utilities underground. So it's a limited development, more emphasis on open space. In Area 3, it has a frontage on Rollins Road, so we have more of a commercial emphasis there as well. And then in Area 2 and 4, there's a windrow opportunity, so we try to integrate that into some of the open space network that we're hoping to achieve throughout the whole area. We did talk a lot about open space opportunities for public and private, and I had two concepts that ultimately merged into what we're looking at today, which is a combination of creating a green network as well as some green nodes or park nodes that occur within the specific plan area. And ideally, we put in some potential locations of where those ideally will occur to try to maintain this 1/8 mile radius between those green destinations, but also discussing a lot about the treatment of the streetscapes and the paseos and areas within the development opportunities so that there is an emphasis on an overall green network within the area. And then the organization of our specific plan is hopefully relatively intuitive, but we wanted to go through it this evening with you guys and make sure it's understandable. And we're going to talk about it in components. So this is the order we hope to go through: the objectives, the design standards, the vision, then talk a little bit about circulation, open space, the design guidelines, and then ultimately the discussion of the use, implementation, and the potential community benefits. So we have it organized into chapters. They do integrate with one another, they inform one another, and they follow this order. The bit that I was talking about with the areas of emphasis is explained in chapter 4, so the uniqueness of each area is there. And then the sections also have an order of objective design standards as well as design guidelines. So first and foremost, what we established was our objective and vision for the specific plan. So we really wanted to help make this a transit-focused opportunity. So we're promoting that its proximity to the transit center, as emphasizing the green network as well. So we're trying to make it a place that feels like it has a character and a uniqueness that's special. A lot of the outreach really liked an emphasis on art and having somewhat of a maker's district that feels like it's got some flavor and flair that's different. So I'll pass it to Cindy with KTGY to chat about our objective design standards.
Thank you, Casey. The urban design elements of the specific plan consist of our objective design standards and site and building design guidelines. The standards are required and the guidelines are encouraged. The objective design standards of the specific plan will apply to only the residential mixed-use developments that qualify for Senate Bill 35 and Senate Bill 330. The standards will cover quantitative elements that have been categorized under landscape and architecture sections, as Casey had mentioned. Within the architecture section, we have standards that cover building orientation, wall plane breaks, percentage of exterior walls with windows, ground floor minimum height for mixed-use buildings, and parking garage screening, trying to make it really clear so that staff can go back and check off these elements as they go through the specific plan. This latest draft, we revised to include comments from the CAC and TAC in regards of wall plane breaks and the retail height and also building entries. Can you go to the next slide, Casey? In general, the intent of these guidelines and standards was that we want to provide for an eclectic mix of residential, live, work, commercial, retail, light industrial development that had an industrial and contemporary character that we heard was really special about this stretch of Burlingame. These were written not to be prescriptive, the guidelines, but to encourage designs that will meet the intent through different approaches. We hope that it provides enough framework without impeding design creativity and flexibility. This chapter is organized with site and general guidelines in the beginning, and then we get into building specific typologies, some examples which are shown on the screen. So the podium building on the bottom, and then more of the wrap type building on the top. Each section covers building elements that have an impact on the public realm and the streetscape. And the goal is to create a pedestrian scale and engaging environment with them. There are no specific architectural styles that are called out in the specific plan. Again, the goal is to allow for a mix of design that can create an eclectic character. This is something we heard from the community and the CAC. It is noted that the ornate architecture, however, is not recommended. Additionally, this section includes sustainability guidelines, which are all recommendations. We reference the city's REACH code and encourage projects to be designed and constructed towards LEED equivalent standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I'll talk about the land uses. The allowed land uses within the specific plan is similar to that of the existing zoning designation, with some minor refinements based on comments that we've heard throughout the plan process. As Casey mentioned before, there's no different districts within this specific plan area. Just predominantly kind of there's some more guidance in terms of the retail focus along Rollins Road. The allowed land uses, very similar to the existing zoning, are allowing for multifamily residential, commercial uses, compatible light industrial uses, and mixed uses. The specific plan also includes 3 different tiers of development incentives with requirements for certain community benefits, which is similar to the existing code. We'll highlight the modifications in a little bit. And the maximum base intensity for the specific plan allows for up to 70 units per acre for multifamily uses, and a maximum floor area ratio of 1:1, which is essentially 1 square footage of buildable area for 1 square foot of lot area. And those are for the non-residential uses. And I'll hand it off to Casey. We'll talk about circulation.
Thank you. So again, we wanted to have an emphasis on pedestrian and bike movement throughout the space. We had studied a lot of different options and landed on this ultimate section that has a slight separation between the bike and the on-street parking with a planting area as well as a sidewalk. We did decide to have Cheryl occur on Adrian so that the emphasis for the bike movement occurs on Rollins. And we also said everywhere there is opportunity to provide bulb out so that there is a reduced exposure of pedestrian crossing within the street. And then we try to really control how those are designed to encourage slowing the speed of the car where reasonable and allowing some of that traffic calming so it's a little safer for pedestrians moving throughout the space. So we also designed for some of these flexible use zones. A lot of the imagery that was shared throughout our community outreach had a lot of great response to these street frontages that had a lot of life. So we tried to designate opportunity zones within the space on the sidewalk so that there can be room for amenities, as well as potentially having some activation of those spaces like cafes, as we might see in these circumstances, and really try to prioritize always the pedestrian and the bike when feasible. So we're minimizing those conflicts with the different modes of transportation. And then we make some suggestions with our design guidelines in addition to the objective design standards that are trying to indicate that the priority is to try to keep a cohesive opportunity of landscape where possible, but also allowing for, as Cindy mentioned, some of that creativity and innovation. So we're not incredibly prescriptive, but allowing it to have an alignment with the character that we're seeking throughout the whole area, but still maintaining some of these baseline regulations which need to occur in order to meet the objective design standards. And throughout the landscape design guidelines, we show a lot of inspiration imagery and talk about some of the intentions behind the open space. There is an indication of what the street trees are expected to be, so we can try to maintain some consistency throughout the street experience. And we also provide some concept designs high level for what we might want to see in the space underneath the utilities, or some ideas for the purpose and intention of the paseos or alleyways that are contributing to that greater green network. And then we really encourage a mix of gathering opportunities, so small and large, ideally engaging with some of the public space, creating opportunities for people to gather, and really encouraging some of that indoor-outdoor environment use. And we love some of these character images throughout the outreach process that we did integrate into the design guidelines to really demonstrate how we're looking to have a vibrant district that's engaging for the people who may be living there as well as visitors. And in our open space plan, as we saw earlier, we're trying to make sure that there are a lot of green opportunities within the space, as well as connections between all of those. So there's a mixture of some of these techniques, the linear park, pocket parks, plazas, paseos, and maybe ultimately the addition of green roofs and private open spaces, so that in a higher density circumstances, there are still opportunities to be outside, interacting with neighbors and being social and having some of those mixed use opportunities. And again, so just more some suggestions about where those things could be located and how we'd like them to interact with one another. So it's not just disparate pieces, but really creating an aggregate of all of those together that make the green network and make the space feel really connected and integrated, especially for the pedestrian experience.
Thank you, Casey. Chapter 5 contains the policy details about the uses and operations that would be located within the sites within the specific plan area. This includes permitted land uses, land use regulations for specific uses, such as food manufacturing, breweries, temporary uses, special events, and items that might require conditional use, and certain uses that might require conditional use permits. That would have to go through the Planning Commission review. And this chapter also includes development standards such as setbacks and open space requirements. Really what we looked at for the land uses, we really wanted to encourage those uses that would really interact with the public realm or the streetscape. So really kind of get those uses that would bring activity outside of the building and help kind of foster into the what we call kind of the quasi-public realm, either in front of the building, behind the sidewalk. Really wanted to kind of focus on that. And so the specific plan allows for and also includes regulations for items such as mobile vendors, festivals, street performers, in addition to breweries, distilleries, and other ones that I've already mentioned. As with the existing code, the development standards do include a tiered system. Essentially, it encourages projects to provide additional community benefits for the ability to develop at a higher residential or non-residential floor area ratio or density. The development standards also include an item called pageantry, which is kind of essentially enhanced signage to allow for additional provisions for kiosks, graphics, and banners. Really kind of looking beyond at least the physical realm and kind of looking at it at a more smaller scale to really kind of produce some energy and synergy with the area. And then also this section does include an art and public places provision for the specific plan area. Next slide, please. Detailing about community benefits, the specific plan increases the number of benefits required. So essentially to go from tier 2 instead of 2, or increasing it to 3, a minimum of 3 benefits, and the tier 3 instead of 3 benefits is now 4 benefits as a minimum to kind of hit that. And additionally, by requiring additional community benefits, we are adding additional community benefits to the menu from the existing code. Essentially, publicly accessible park enhancements. And defining as a 15-foot minimum paseo, creating or inclusion of a community or neighborhood center, providing a ground floor retail space, providing a grocery store, including affordable housing, or providing additional public art beyond the minimum requirement. Next slide. And then just wrapping it up with the specific plan summary, chapter 6 is just about implementing just essentially how the specific plan is going to be administered, who's responsible, essentially going to be responsible for the phasing as well as different financing alternatives, and mentioning that the streetscape improvements, which Casey detailed about the bulb outs, and that they could be initiated by the city or as improved on a per project basis by the developer. This also will need to be analyzed per CEQA, and so we do have we will have essentially an intensity summary that will kind of correlate that, so make it easier to implement and for staff to review. And also it does include a detailed process for the new Arts and Public Places program. And with that, I'll hand it over to Director Gardner, who will talk about the Planning Commission.
I will unmute. Sorry about freezing over there recently. We did review the draft plan with the Planning Commission last month. Some of the items are summarized in the staff report. There's interest in finding ways to have a grocery store in the area, maybe not as big as what the plan had. It could be smaller. Idea of maybe park and lieu fees if it's not as feasible to provide parkland within a project itself. Looking at open space to be proportional to project size. And in fact, we do have, for the larger projects, it is proportional. We're trying to find that regulation when we did the Planning Commission meeting and couldn't find it. But generally for properties that are over 50,000 square feet or a little more than an acre, the requirement is 12% of the site would be for open space. So bigger the site, bigger the open space. There's an interest in streetscape lighting and having that coordinated, in particular with new projects coming in and building their street frontages to have some kind of consistent guidance so that over time there's a consistent look and feel to the street. Discussion of native or non-native plants, and there is some direction in the specific plan to favor native plants, but also there's ensuring that there's provisions for non-native, including some of the street trees that are specified elsewhere in the plan. Some interest in whether there should be a hierarchy for neighborhood services in terms of how they're located on Rollins Road. Interest in crosswalks to ensure that right now there's not a lot of crosswalks, but over time we would want more as part of that streetscape plan. Supporting services and interest in school, and in particular, what's the population that we expect, and how many school-age children would there be, and impacts on schools. And then finally, just kind of clarification on the Rollins Road. What is that streetscape section or that sidewalk section, and how close are the buildings coming? We plan to enhance some of the graphics in the plan to make that a little more clear, but the intention is to have really wide sidewalks, great street trees, lots of planting along Rollins Road, and Rollins Road really becomes a kind of a landscape spine in and of itself, as well as being the main transportation spine.
Thank you, Kevin. And then just identifying the next steps and where we are in the process. We are currently in the environmental stage, preparing the environmental document, and hoping to go to the Planning Commission and City Council in the spring of 2023.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that great presentation. Colleagues, I'm sure there's questions. Let's see who wants to go first. Anybody? Oh, Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just applaud everyone's hard work. In particular, our subcommittee, Councilmember O'Brien and Councilmember Colson. Loved hearing the Planning Commission's comments. What a fun project. What just a transformational thing for our city. It's just, and great job with the consultants and staff too. Very exciting to read through this. So I have a couple of questions I wanted to run by, and Mr. Gardner was very helpful in preparation for this meeting. Also love the vision for these sustainable neighborhoods. I love the green focus and the proximity for the pedestrian experience near open space. Sustainable neighborhoods feels like the major theme. When we talk about community benefits, there was a list in the staff report and on the presentation. I was glad to see in the detailed specific plan that childcare facilities are a possible community benefit that's added as well. I was interested as I drilled down that larger childcare facilities aren't allowed in the specific plan. And I think it just merits a conversation. I think it'd be helpful for Mr. Gardner just to explain the context behind that, because I had some questions as I read through it, and then it'll lead to one other question I have as a follow-up. But Mr. Gardner, I think it'd be just valuable for the public to understand the limits on the childcare facilities in this part of town where we're growing housing.
Sure. Yeah, so this This area is close to the airport, and around SFO, there are are called airport safety zones, and they're all mapped. They're based on either the landing or the takeoff approaches to the airport, and then the turning areas. And if properties fall within one of these designated safety zone areas, there's limitations on what kinds of uses can occur in those zones. This specific plan area is entirely within what's called Safety Zone 3, which is not the most restrictive, but not the least either. The restrictions relate primarily to assemblies and sensitive uses. So large childcare is not permitted per the airport land use compatibility plan, nor are schools or large assemblies such as theaters. So the intent is that should there be, we all hope there is not a airplane accident, but if there is, that there isn't a assembly of sensitive users or of people that would be disproportionately hurt. There's also limitations on hazardous materials, which apply less here because we're not really promoting the life science uses within this zone. And those are the ones that tend to have the higher grade hazardous materials, but it is a filter that applies over the entire planning area. So there are some restrictions that there is always the possibility of a local override. I think we discussed that when we brought the general plan through the Airport Land Use Committee. If there's a local override, the city takes the burden of the responsibility and liability. So it's generally not a popular option, but it is an option should a jurisdiction feel that they want to take responsibility for deviating from the airport's land use restrictions.
Thanks for the context and the explanation for why childcare facilities greater than 15 aren't allowed in this area. I think that's helpful to understand. Given that, though, I mean, building sustainable neighborhoods, childcare, I'm glad it's a possible community benefit. Something that I'd like to explore, if the city council were to choose some kind of hierarchy for community benefits, which we preferred, is there a mechanism for that in the specific, would that be the right place to put it in the specific plan? Sounds like the planning commission was asking about that too. Could we prioritize and say, green space, childcare, or fill in the blank, whatever it is, to prioritize certain community benefits?
I can defer to the consultant team. My guess is there probably are models where there's weighted benefits, but certainly I see John unmuted himself. So if you want to speak to that point.
Sure. I would just say, should the council kind of elect to have, there could, as Director Gardner mentioned, there could be weighted benefits. Essentially, we could evaluate the numbering system and essentially kind of assigning points to kind of different ones.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. I have, I guess, 3 other faster questions. I'll reserve my comments for after public comment. I went back and listened to our meeting last December, and there was some question about whether or not the bicycle kind of plan for Rollins Road was aligned with our bike ped master plan. At this point through the evolution, just wanted to cover our bases. Is this version of the Rollins Road bicycle facility that's sort of proposed, is the vision aligned with the bike ped master plan?
Yes, it is. So previously there had been a different preferred design. The Community Advisory Committee really liked the concept of a 2-way cycle track that would be located on one side of the road. And it was thought that that would really kind of enliven the Rollins Road corridor and be a kind of interesting way of circulation. That would not have been consistent with the master plan, however. So further consideration through, we also had a technical advisory committee, so that was a staff level discussion. We also met with members of the city of Millbrae to see how everything would line up across the border. The decision was made to switch to the bike lanes on both sides of the road, which is consistent with the bike ped master plan. It also makes it a slightly easier transition to what's going on over in Millbrae, where they have a new plan for a cycle track that goes kind of meanders through and under the Millbrae Avenue Bridge so that you don't have to cross Millbrae Avenue. And we could have connected to it either way, but it does make it a little more straightforward to have the lanes on both sides, and then you just kind of make the turnaround. So that has been that is a change in the plan and is now consistent with the city's master plan.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. The school district, Burlingame School District, people always ask us, we have development and changes and housing. Have we engaged them in this process?
Yes, and in fact, we have them engaged in a kind of broader process, so it's not just specific to this plan. They are very much aware of this plan, as well as the 3 different housing developments that have been already approved in this planning area. So they are looking at their enrollment figures. We meet with them periodically, more in the context of total residential build out throughout the city, and their projections versus what's going on with enrollment. In recent years, enrollment has been dropping within the city of Burlingame. So make what you will of that. It is providing more capacity for future residents. And at least from, I want to be careful not to speak for the district, but we have had constructive discussions and they're aware of the numbers. I think they, I don't want to speak for them. I'll just say we're having constructive dialogue. Yeah, they're engaged, and I would say there's not alarm bells other than how to get students to school. So probably the challenges are that a lot of our housing development is very much on the north side of town. So that could, depending on how the enrollment plays out, have more of an impact on particular schools than others. And so that could be an issue. It's more distribution than total numbers. But then also it's hard right now. The district doesn't rely on school buses to get students to the elementary schools, and school buses are difficult from staffing more than anything. But so this area is a bit isolated from the local schools, and most likely, you know, whichever school the students are assigned to. So the access is somewhat of a concern, probably more than the enrollment itself.
Okay, thanks for that. And then my last kind of brief question is, I know there's been some state law changes with parking requirements around transit-oriented development communities, and I noticed we still have some parking requirements. Do we need to adjust those based on the new state law in the draft plan?
Yes, we're going to be studying that. The plan was drafted prior to the adoption of legislation, and we're still kind of getting our heads around what exactly, you know, what is it, a blanket exemption or are there strings attached? So we want to figure that out a little better, but certainly the next version of the plan that comes for adoption will have that assembly bill factored in terms of either acknowledging it or changing the standards depending on how exactly it applies to this planning area.
All right, thanks, Mr. Gardner. Mr. Mayor, thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask those questions. I'll reserve comment till after.
Very good. Thank you for your questions. Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will likewise try to be disciplined about keeping my comments for later and make this about questions. I really appreciate the presentation. I ditto Council Member Beach, her compliments to our subcommittee of Council Member Colson and O'Brien for doing this work. It's an unfair question, but to my friends from the consulting groups, do you know the last time the city of Burlingame created a neighborhood?
Like 1952, Ray Park?
Exactly, 1950, so 70 years ago. So this is a big freaking deal for us to create a 90-acre neighborhood. And I say that because what is so striking to me is the difference, the tools that are different for the city today versus the city back then. Back then it was raw land and the city could pretty much draw the kind of development it wanted. And it put residential kind of, west of El Camino, and it put industrial east of El Camino. And what's striking about the presentation is how much of what we want in this new neighborhood we're trying to encourage through incentives. We're not directing because it's not our land. We're trying to incent. And the part that worries me as a public official, I'm 1,000% behind this policy. All 5 of us were advocates for it. But we also were advocates for not being the ones who create the first bad neighborhood in Burlingame. We have no bad neighborhoods. Every neighborhood is pedestrian friendly. It's got great schools. It's safe. It's easy to get around, and it's easy to get to commercial places to shop and restaurants. So my question is, where I guess I worry that by only using incentives, we might not get the neighborhood that we want. And I guess in a way, John, your comment about you can weight, different things to make sure at least you're more likely to get this or that element is really an important observation. But I don't know which elements are most important. And much as I trust my colleagues, I don't think we're urban planners. And so I would like some reassurance that we can get a neighborhood in 10 years that feels like a neighborhood, and not and relying only on incentives. How can you reassure me that relying only on incentives, we're going to get that neighborhood? And then a secondary question is, if the city needs to own land to make sure certain things happen, then will you tell us what that is? If we need a library over there to make it feel like a neighborhood, then let's figure out how the city can get a library. You know what I'm trying to say? We don't have those tools that they had 70 years ago to just tell people, this is a park, this is a library, this is where the homes go. And I'm concerned that relying just on private sector incentives may not get the neighborhood we want. Sorry, that was a lot.
So no, and I definitely thank you for that, and thank you for the comment, and we all want to see this as a successful and thriving neighborhood for the city of Burlingame. The one comment, even though that incentives are included in there, the incentive is actually kind of the unique factor of the specific plan. Generally, most specific plans essentially include a laundry list of minimums. And if it's been our experience that essentially if you provide just a list of minimums, what you get sometimes is just the minimum. So what we want to do is combine a set of minimums with incentives to really try to help implement the vision. The other thing that we've had with specific plans in the past couple of years is a lot of the laws that are coming from the state, which really kind of limit what we can do with specific plans in terms of predominantly in terms of parking and density requirements. And there's also one provision in there about feasibility too. So we have to make sure that all these requirements and inclusion items that we have in the specific plan, that they're feasible for a standard kind of residential developer. And that's why we have a KTGY has done a number of residential developments. And so we have that understanding. In terms of the benefits, and we can definitely recommend some, but a lot of the items that you would want for sure, open space. Open space is one items that you would want to include in there. The one other item that we heard as part of our outreach as well too is also the fact of a grocery store. I'm a little more confident in how we can kind of implement a open space and having that required, and I feel very confident about that. The grocery store is going to be a little bit different because that you can't just force a grocer to come there and to operate. That's going to be something that's going to involve a developer. It's going to involve city staff to try to get a grocer to kind of come in there. And we really feel that the incentive-based approach and also just working with developers or landowners of the property, kind of identifying a space and really everyone trying to get on board and trying to promote a certain certain food vendor to locate there. That's generally the best goal, but then essentially incentivizing it to make it easier for that developer when it kind of goes through.
Okay, I appreciate that, John. And it feels like, you know, we can be optimistic, but we can't be passive. I guess that's what I'm hearing. We can't be passive. We have to be really work hard. And that means, you know, our staff work hard with the developers to make sure we get these key elements as they come along. Two other very quick questions, Mr. Mayor. One, did Gates or any of the consultants consider the idea of connectivity across the rail tracks? Because right now, obviously, you have to either go to Millbrae Avenue or over to Broadway. Did you guys look at the opportunity to create connectivity, whether it's a pedestrian or bike bridge over the tracks? This would also play into, you know, getting kids to schools over on the west side safely.
Yes, we did. We did look at that, and the specific plan does identify a location. Just because of the heavy rail, it does make it difficult for terms of engineering and pretty costly. But it is towards the eastern end of the specific plan area where a potential future crossing could occur.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sure it is expensive. And then finally, and this is more general, but I personally think that Mission Bay and Dogpatch has done a really good job of sort of what we're trying to do. Just take a formerly industrial down at the Heels area and turn it into a really vibrant area. So my question is this, which is the specific plan that you're recommending that we've worked on. Do we have the same kind of key elements and key ingredients that plan had? Like, have we learned from their plans, whatever they were? Because I think they've been I realize they're talking about a lot more land and there are other elements that make it different. But I think in general, they've been very successful in making this kind of transition. So are we learning from their playbook, I guess is my question.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was, yeah, my cat just decided to jump on my lap, so apologize. So yes, and looking at some of the analogs as we're kind of looking through is Santa Barbara Funk Zone is kind of another one that kind of came up a lot as well too. And so we're definitely kind of incorporating that, and then a lot of those provision and kind of design and intensities, as well as the flexibility yet establishing appropriate minimum standards in the development standards are kind of intended to kind of reflect and essentially emulate those types of developments, and kind of hopeful to have not essentially recreate, because we want it to be unique and unique to Burlingame, but kind of allow for that creativity to kind of flourish in this area.
And I'll add, we also looked at Emeryville and maybe the Barlow. There was a lot of good examples that the CAC members had shared, and our team members have experienced that well, trying to pick the best elements from all those great neighborhoods to see how they would apply here.
Thank you all very much. And thanks to the subcommittee again for its work.
Thank you. Thank you for the good questions. Thank you for the great presentation. Colleagues, any other questions? And having none, then let's open it to members of the public who may have a question on this item.
Yep, I received an email, Mayor Ortiz. It's from Mr. Rabalos. He says, I am very enthusiastic about the North Rollins specific plan. I hope that to the south on Rollins Road, we can attach a seamless pike/pedestrian linked, I think it's supposed to be bike/pedestrian link to the bayfront, adjacent to David Road, Mills Creek, either under or over the 101 freeway, with a seamless bike/pedestrian connection to Burlingame's Broadway commercial corridor. And I see that we also have a hand raised, and it's Jennifer Pfaff. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. So am I on?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. So I'm going to actually make comment as not a planning commissioner, if you will, just Jennifer, because I would have listened to this meeting anyway. I am not similar to Vice Mayor Brownrigg's comments. I am not seeing how we get from the beautiful job that this consultant has done and the work they thought that has gone into the pictures and such. I am not seeing how we get from what has the 3 projects that have already been approved to that with, I'm assuming those were standards that are similar to what are being proposed with this draft. And in particular, I do not see enough emphasis on open space. I also don't, there was a comment by Planning Director Gardner that the scale is commensurate with the proportion of the project, but I don't see that in what I read. I don't see that. And if it is this, that it says where a total lot area or development site equals 50,000 square feet or greater, public open space shall meet the following minimum, which is very minimum 1,500 square feet in size. So we just approved, the Planning Commission just approved one that is over 400,000 square feet. And so, it's a nice little trick there to do, to do 49,000 or whatever the cutoff number is to keep costs down. I understand everyone wants to keep costs down, but is it possible to make a sliding scale, not just if it's over 25,000, you do this, and if it's over this, you do this, just simply a sliding scale. So it's a real equation so that we don't get workarounds. So that is mainly, it's a question, and it's also a concern. I see, I remember the general plan, we had the funk idea, we had all these things. This is not that. I mean, I see it in the plan. I don't see that's what we're going to get. And I don't know if we'll ever get it. So similarly, I am as a person who had great interest in the general plan and what this area was going to become. I am similarly questioning if this has enough teeth in it, in particular with the state mandates.
Jennifer, that's 3 minutes. If you could.
I'm very sorry. That's it. I think you get the gist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pfaff. And thank you, Mr. Revelos. Do we have any other public comment?
No, that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I am going to there is no action on this item, so you're just going to bring it back to final comments from everybody. I have to agree with many of the things that the Vice Mayor said. I'm very excited and I'm looking forward to seeing this blossom, but it's blossoming a little quicker than I thought it was going to, and that's what's scary. So with that, I'll go to the Vice Mayor again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to make an opportunity for our consulting colleagues to answer Ms. Pfaff's question, which was in a way a version of mine too, I think, which is, how confident can we be we'll get to this promised land? I do think, things do take time, but on the other hand, if all the land gets sold anyway, I think making space for an answer to that would be useful. I just wanted to make one comment, which is in reading the specific plan. I think it would help if in the beginning, in the first chapter, it's written very much like a normal specific plan. And like Councilwoman O'Brien, I'm a veteran of several of them, which is all about land use. But I found the rationale for doing this to be not there. And I think it's helpful for the record. And I do think the rationale was the changing economic circumstances of Burlingame, really moving away from becoming a place where there are starter homes where there are places where people can get in, where regular, where kids who might have blue collar parents can go to school with kids who have white collar, that is part of what motivated this council into turning 90 acres over into a new neighborhood. And I would love to see some of that economic and slightly social rationale for this decision in the Chapeau chapter. And I could think you guys can probably take it from there, but it was part of the rationale. It wasn't just like, oh, how do we drive more economic development, or how do we get a bigger tax base? It was like, how do we make sure our town stays a collection of people from different walks of life, from different economic backgrounds, which we always have been. And I think it's important to get that in the specific plan, because that's largely what motivated us. And it wasn't being pushed around by the state or anybody else. It was what we thought was the right thing to do. So I just wanted to offer that as a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Great comments, great conversation. I guess I would be in support in future iterations as the staff and the subcommittee, just figuring out maybe if there is a hierarchy, maybe explore that weighted average for things we want to see more of, like that open space. Maybe it's reducing fees or streamlining processes for certain things we want to encourage. Maybe we need to leverage our impact fees in a different way when we go through our impact needs study and market analysis, what's feasible, particularly in this area. So I think there's some opportunity for us to think more about that. I do think, my question started with the childcare facilities for a sustainable neighborhood. I do think that's something we need to think carefully about, particularly given that the larger childcare facilities aren't allowed in this part of the world, and this part of the city, and we are creating a lot more housing. We are creating more jobs. We know that in, I guess, 2017, we had a presentation on the childcare early learning needs analysis. The county's doing an updated version of that in 2022, but we knew back in 2017 we were at I think a 700 space deficit in Burlingame. The pandemic hasn't helped things. So I do think we need to lean in and figure out where in the city, if not here, but what can we do to create incentives for whatever childcare facilities we can bring in to help make it a more sustainable neighborhood. Probably this neighborhood, and I remember when we studied this in our general plan, isn't going to be maybe the largest family neighborhoods, but it's very likely with these smaller units TOD that it could be some of our youngest children. And there will be a need for those types of facilities. So I think that's just something I want to put on the radar. There was another, I guess, a public comment earlier about community benefits for sustainable workforce. So whether we can have community benefits and incentives for construction developers that have support apprenticeships or healthcare prevailing wages. I know we had that discussion about the Bayfront earlier. I would fully support that as a listed and enumerated community benefit if that were the will of colleagues as well. But I think great job overall. This plan is really exciting. It's going to be so transformational, and I applaud the work that's done to date. Thanks for the really thoughtful conversation tonight.
Councilmember Colson.
Thank you very much. This plan has been, well, first of all, I do want to acknowledge the very important work and perspective that Councilwoman O'Brien brought to this project, having served on the Planning Commission and with the work she's done over the years. And since this is sort of the capstone meeting of her 17-year career, I think it's appropriate that this kind of a project come forth, and we recognize and thank her for the years and years of service to Burlingame that she has provided from the start to the finish in terms of really substantial and significant projects like this. And we'll have more time to talk about that in December, but I really just want to thank her because it was a pleasure working with her on this project. I think that Ms. Pfaff, Commissioner Pfaff has brought up some really good points about sort of the teeth. And I think, a 1,500 square foot plaza, is against a, 400 unit apartment building is just de minimis. It doesn't even look like a plaza. So I do think, Kevin, if we can just take a look at those kind of relationships and scale, I don't know if we can redo that or how we figure that out or think about it. But I do think, we've been lucky that we've gotten a good developer in Summerhill in 2 of our projects that we've already had going, and they have done a nice parks, a dog park, and then a nice other park in their projects. And they've given us, I think, 1/3 of an acre and a quarter or another 1/3 of an acre, which are pretty good little neighborhood park sizes. And I'm concerned that not every developer is going to be as gratuitous as and gracious as Summerhill and are going to try to push the edge of the envelope. And I want our planning commission and our staff to feel very comfortable in pushing back on that and making sure that we are getting the benefits that we need. And while I can really appreciate the fact that, there's Council Member Beach has urged us to consider union labor benefit. Frankly, most of these buildings are going to be built with almost all union labor anyway, because of the nature and size and scope. And I would hate to lose a real community, an actual physical community benefit for something that most likely is going to happen anyway. For at least 70-80% of the project is my guess. And focus instead on the parks and the open space. I love the daycare conversation. And also just, I want people to really understand too, we spent a lot of time on the roads, the bike lanes, the sidewalks, and the walkability of it. And that, I think, will create some of that feel, Michael, that magicalness that you're thinking about, the trees down the middle of the road. And it's really hard to see now when you're down there, and I'm down there a lot. It's just really hard to see because of the vast size of Rollins Road and the lack of intimacy that's going on and the lack of pedestrians that you see there. But once I believe we start to have some of these buildings filled and people start to live there, I do think we will begin to feel it, and that magicalness will go. But Kevin, do you feel comfortable that you can, essentially require these developers to put in these benefits in ways that will be meaningful?
Yes, let me respond, but I do see Councilmember O'Brien's hand up. So I would suggest we hear from her, and then I can kind of provide some responses to these different points.
Go ahead, Councilmember O'Brien.
Thank you. So I would commend everyone that was involved in putting this together. A lot of hours, blood, sweat, and tears was put into this. So it's, one of these rare opportunities we have as a council to create a new neighborhood. And so this is not something that's going to happen overnight, and it does take, careful planning. The one thing that I really do want to see futuristically, in this area is, yes, we have a requirement for all this housing, but for me, housing doesn't work unless you actually make it a neighborhood. And so that's where the neighborhood services really come into play. And, we have talked in this specific plan that, we want to keep some of this industrial. We want it to be eclectic. And maybe, we look at this industrial, some of these warehouses and really turn that into entertainment options that, people have places to go. For example, you have the Brewery X in Anaheim, which, you go there and, there are these beautiful gardens that are actually, some are outdoors, some are indoor. They have, the beers, the seltzers, pizza, food trucks, trivia, and it just brings an enormous amount of people from the area. And that's what I would actually really love to see here. Your wine bars, you may have indoor family entertainment. But in order for that to happen, we're going to have economic development, I think, is going to play a huge role in developing this new neighborhood, where you have someone that is going out to all these different kind of cool options and trying to woo people. They're not just going to come overnight, and we can't expect, the developers that are coming in to really know that, or the landowners who maybe might lack that vision. But you got to lay it out for them and educate them about the value of this, and looking at, that long term. It's kind of like looking at, the Burlingame Avenue in 2016, where we had a phenomenal partnership, the city with our landowners. And it took a while, but they were able to eventually see that vision, and look what we have created. We have been so successful, and we are usually, I think usually we're ahead of that curve. We're setting phenomenal examples, and other cities are trying to emulate that. So here is another opportunity to do so. So I do think economic development is huge in this. The other thing is, when we have open space, you want to make sure it's just not open space, it's usable open space. And then also something to think about futuristically, is there a way, the city can acquire maybe a larger parcel and incorporate something similar to what we're doing on Park and Lorton, another kind of town square for a neighborhood to gather and have actual programming, outdoor programming, so that there are a lot of different events, going on in that neighborhood. We also don't want to seclude that neighborhood, that it's only that neighborhood that utilizes amenities. We want other locals in Burlingame to be able to go over there too. Just like, they would come over to, our Washington Park or downtown area. So that's why, some retail is going to be important. Grocery store that we just put on Broadway that people are raving about, we need something like that over there. So I just think, for me, going off the council now, is to really look at the neighborhood services, because I really don't think it's going to be successful unless that is integrated. And I do think you all have a phenomenal opportunity. And I know you think, what's best for Burlingame. I appreciate all the community input through this whole process. I think that's going to be very important, moving forward. But that we create a neighborhood that is welcoming for everyone, whether it's the young or old, professionals, retirees. I just think this is such an opportunity to have a lot of integration. And so have fun doing that. I really look forward to kind of watching the process and really see what that end result's going to be.
Thank you for the comments. Anybody else? Again, there's no action item here. I think we've heard the comments. Did you guys, Mr. Moreland, Rickon, or Mr. Gardner, would you guys care to comment on any of the issues that we just raised?
Sure, let me address a few. And I also want to add, and again, thank you to particularly Council Members Colson and O'Brien for working on this. And also, we had this great Citizens Advisory Committee that also the council members kind of handpicked existing property owners and business owners that are within the Rollins Road area now who see the vision. And I'll say that those CAC meetings were really fun. I think everybody got, excited with the possibilities. And, I think the analog is probably closer to Dogpatch than Mission Bay, just in terms of the diversity of the land uses. Mission Bay is impressive. It had one single landowner sort of driving a lot of it, whereas Dogpatch is much more like Rollins Road. It's just sort of, and I think the Funk Zone is also a good example down in Santa Barbara. I think one area that could be prioritized to really set the stage would be the streetscape itself. It is presented in the specific plan as a future capital project, and there is a bit of money from the prior specific plan that can roll over. It's not a lot, but it's enough to, maybe seed that project going forward. And I'm glad Councilmember O'Brien mentioned Burlingame Avenue in 2016, and look what happened once the streetscape was put in. It really sort of just supercharged the whole district. So I think that could be a priority. I'm hearing the, perhaps prioritization of some of the community benefits as well, to weight them. And one thing I did want to clarify, and there's confusion, and we were confused as well, is the open space requirement for the larger projects. It's addressed in two different places in the plan, and so that's a cleanup item for us. In one place, it mentions if it's 50,000 square feet or larger, then it's the 1,500 square foot space. The other part where the requirement is addressed in parallel does mention this 12% of site area standard. So we need to align that so that that proportional standard is in both parts of the plan, or maybe we just have that standard in one place. And where we did come up with the 12% was looking at those two Summerhill projects and saying, those kind of felt right for the amount of open space compared to the project. They're, nice pocket parks are large enough. You can do something more than just a lawn or a plaza. I think we have, hopefully the plan is learning from both the good examples we've seen and maybe places where we had hoped projects would do a little more. So that's, there is sort of that interwoven in the background of the plan, is to try to catch these things going forward. But we do appreciate, and if others have more thoughts afterwards, the plan will come back again. We'll kind of work on what we've heard tonight. But I think this is really good feedback, and likewise from the Planning Commission, we appreciated that as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Thank you, everybody. Great comments. And this is a really important subject for us, and we got to stay on it. So thank you, everybody. So with that, we will move on to item number 11, which is Council Committee and Activities Reports and Announcements. So colleagues, anybody have anything? I don't see anybody raising their hand. And with that, I will open it to future agenda items. Now's the time. Nope. And with that, we have acknowledgements, the agenda packets and meeting minutes for the Planning Commission, Traffic Safety and Parking Commission, Beautification Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Library Board of Trustees are available online at www.burlingame.org. And going to adjournment, do we have anybody we want to remember in our adjournment? No? Okay, so with that, we are adjourned, and next time we will meet for our ceremonial meeting, which I am looking forward to being in person. So good night, everybody. Thank you.